In order to make sure that companies are adhering to consumer protection laws, the National Consumer Commission has begun conducting nationwide inspections on food and goods traders in the country. Over the past few years, the South African communities have experienced a surge in informal traders suspected to be selling expired goods, with vendors prioritizing their personal gain over the welfare of their clients. We now speak to the National Consumer Commission's head of compliance complaints as well as investigations, Prudence Moilwa, who's joining us in studio. Prudence, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Good morning, and thank you for having us.
Let's start off with why the National Consumer Commission embarked on this nationwide inspection.
No, thank you. The National Consumer Commission has actually been observing the public discourse. If you are aware, on social media and also I think on various television programs, there has been discussions around expired goods where members of communities have actually been very, very frustrated with the fact that government was not doing enough, and hence the National Consumer Commission embarked on this nationwide inspection drive.
Mm-hmm. So then tell us, what does legislation say when it comes to especially perishable goods?
Okay. Firstly, the National Consumer Commission takes its powers from the Consumer Protection Act. The Consumer Protection Act states that consumers in the markets, in South African markets, are entitled to goods that are safe as well as of good quality. So the Consumer Commission takes its mandate exactly from what these provisions are saying. And together with that, the very same section that talks to the quality of food and other products states that the goods that are sold in the markets have to also adhere to other regulations. And as we are aware, the health provisions in terms of the Health Act states in the regulations that the best before have to be labeled. Now, when they are labeled and manufacturers produce goods and they say these goods are best before this particular date, we take it from there that the quality of goods are then should not be sold if they have reached their best before dates. Mm-hmm. And we also noted that there is this market. It's not just informal traders, by the way. These are formal shops that are trading in the towns, in the small towns, even in the big towns, where we find that it's actually very prevalent that suppliers sell these goods that have expired indiscriminately.
Yeah. And what does the regulation then say about goods that have been repackaged? Because sometimes you find that, especially in the informal sector though, you find that somebody buys a product in bulk, and then they will when they resell the product, they sell it at smaller portions. But the packaging or the repackaging of that product doesn't have a manufacture date, doesn't have a sell-by date, and so forth. What does the legislation say with regards to that?
Yeah, the same Consumer Protection Act says that when you sell goods, they have to be properly labeled, which means that all the trade descriptions have to be there. That includes who manufactured the product, the date markings also have to be there in terms of the Consumer Protection Act. So when the products are then repackaged into these clear bags, there is actually no indication of when these goods were manufactured, as you say, and also whether or not they're still good for consumption. And one of the reasons why we issued compliance notices is exactly for that trade, where we find that suppliers would then repackage the goods. Even in the formal markets, that's where we also found it, where it's just in clear plastic bags, because these perishables, or even the ones that are non-perishable, there is no way of telling what consumers are eating, actually. So you literally go by the word of the store when they say to you, this is Millie Meal or this is fresh Millie Meal, but you have nothing that informs you. So it's very, very important to understand that when you package goods, you have a responsibility to make sure that proper labeling is done and the date markings are also on the products as well.
So what did you find then from your inspection so far?
Yeah, so far, I must say, because of the drive, we have not only gone to the Free State, we've also touched on Limpopo, we've done the Northern Cape, and a little bit of Gauteng as well. We find the same trend where we find that, because we also partner with the Department of Health as well as the environmental health practitioners, where in certain instances we find that, you know, certain products like your fresh produce, not just fresh produce, but also chicken and other meat products that are visibly rotten. where we literally have had to work with the environmental health practitioners to remove these goods. And indiscriminately, so we also find that some packaged goods, like your oil, cooking oil, that literally when you look at it, you see that the color has even gone off, where you cannot even tell, whether it's still oil or not. So we find those things, and we find that even with the receipts, where they actually say they don't issue receipts to consumers, which means when consumers find a problem with the package or even the product, they cannot then be able to prove that the sale did occur. And also, I think another prevalent issue is the issue of disclosure of pricing, because the law also says if you sell products, the products have to have the prices on them or adjacent to them. This is very important in consumer choice, because consumers need to also know how much the goods are costing, and this is also in the legislation.
Yeah, and from the patterns that you've picked up, would you say that there is a trend, especially with food items that are not clearly marked when the food was produced, but also sometimes you find that it does have an expiry date, but the food is still being sold, and sometimes in a bulk package that makes it more attractive to the consumer? Yeah.
And we've also even found with the bundling of goods as well, because the law also says if you're going to sell goods in a bundle, you need to demonstrate that you will give a discount to consumers. We've also been able to find that those provisions are also being violated, because in packaged goods you find that even in where they are bundled, they actually cost more than if you were buying them individually. So they don't even show that there is a benefit to consumers. And also I think, it's very prevalent, I must say. But then with the drive that we're doing, and even this conversation, we are hoping that we wouldn't have to only get suppliers to comply when we enforce on the ground or do market monitoring. We're hoping that they will then understand that the law requires them to sell good quality goods and disclose information about the products that they sell.
How are they being held accountable outside of just the non-compliance notice that is issued?
Yeah, because we work with other regulators as well as the police. I know there is one instance in Bloemfontein where the store had to be closed down, and the retailer had to be arrested because of the extent of the problem. We must also be aware, and I think it's also useful to state this to the country, to say that the police are also empowered by the Health Act to enforce the regulations of the Health Act. So if we were to also be aware that it is not just the penalties that we can get from the National Consumer Tribunal, to a certain extent there may be even issues of arrest, as well as taking away the goods from the markets as well.
So does this mean that as a consumer, if I go to a retailer right now and I find that there is non-compliance, I probably lodge a complaint with them as well, and my complaint is not entertained, instead of going to the National Consumer Commission, can I go directly to the police?
Yes, the police, especially on the ground, they work closely with the environmental health practitioners, which also fall under the municipalities. So we've actually created very good relationships with them to then say that after we've conducted the inspections on the ground as a team, they should then continue to ensure that enforcement is carried out.
Yeah. Tell us about the cases that you know of in relation to non-compliance and there being enforcement outside of the police's investigation, but what happens with the tribunal? Which companies are there that you can say that these are the companies that have been held responsible on the basis of what we have found?
Yeah. Over and above the work that we've done with the police, we have now issued compliance notices to about 33 suppliers in the Free State. And the compliance notice is a directive in terms of the Consumer Protection Act that says you make sure that you comply with the law by following the following steps. In the event they don't do it in 15 days, the Commission is empowered to go to the National Consumer Tribunal to seek the penalty. And as you know, it's R1 million or 10% of the annual turnover, which is quite steep, especially for small companies. So we have issued the 33 compliance notices in the Free State, and we intend in the next 15 days, I think a week has already passed, 5 days has already passed. In the next 2 days, we then will be communicating on the ground with them to check whether or not they have complied. If they've complied, we'll issue a compliance certificate. If they have not, we will proceed to go to the National Consumer Tribunal to seek the appropriate penalty.
Yeah. So in the case of a tuck shop, how do you enforce a law like that?
Yeah, it's actually...
Because with the tuck shops, most of the time you wouldn't get like, in terms of the bookkeeping, that this is the type of money that we've made in terms of turnover, because of the informal nature of the business as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also very important to say that selling food is serious business. And everybody who sells food actually has to have a certificate of compliance, wherein the surroundings, so the place within which you sell the food has to actually have the certificate of compliance to make sure that the health regulations are complied with. Some of the instances that have been reported to us by consumers on the ground is that we have tuck shops where people sleep in and there are no provision of space for goods to be kept in a healthy way. Those are the ones where we really want to also clamp down on. Because we can say with the tuck shops, we must have a different dispensation. But the same food that is ingested by consumers is the same food that literally would cause harm to consumers. As you know, there have been reports of harm that even has resulted in fatalities by buying things from the tuck shop. So we do not want to discriminate or even give a different dispensation. When you sell food, know that it is serious business. You have to comply with the health regulations. So even the bookkeeping is required from them. So there is no separation with the informal markets or the formal markets. If you're selling, you are trading with a spaza shop, you have to make sure that you have a certificate of compliance, make sure that your bookkeeping is correct, you issue receipts, and you treat consumers fairly. So
one of the major issues that has come to the fore is consumers saying that it is foreign-owned tuck shops that are selling these expired goods. What has your investigation revealed so far when it comes to the sale of these expired goods? And is it more prevalent in a store that is owned by a foreign national compared to stores that are owned by South Africans? Yeah,
I must also say that part of the team that we use, Home Affairs has actually joined us in some of our inspections. So because the issue of nationality does not fall within the ambit of the National Consumer Commission, we have not necessarily focused on the nationality, but I do know that Home Affairs on the ground has actually also joined us, also including the Department of Labor as well. In certain instances, they have also joined us. So what we're trying to do is clamp down on all illegal trading, including that one that includes that. So in terms of statistics, we have not really kept statistics in terms of nationalities, but I can say from the top of my head that there are some that are implicated in such.
Yeah, and what do we do with that?
Yeah, well, obviously the Department of Home Affairs would then take it forward with regard to that. And we also ask that communities assist us, not just in terms of the nationality of the people, but also to assist our local, shop owners to also, because we also do find that even our own people or people who belong to South Africa also sell this type of products, if not promoting them or also sourcing them from some streams that are not necessarily promoting consumer protection.
With that said, as we conclude the conversation, we're going to have a conversation after this with Annie du Plessis as well as Neo Litswalo, where we are looking at how inequality also contributes towards people saying that, listen, because I can't afford and food is so expensive, the cost of living is so high, I'd rather buy food that is expired because it comes at a cheaper price.
Yeah, it's a very interesting conversation because I would really like to also hear what they have to say about that. The National Consumer Commission has actually participated in various conversations, including ones with the food bank, wherein we know that we shouldn't be feeding the poor substandard foods, because then what does that mean? And they have actually assured us that the issue of sustainable consumption is not affected by us clamping down on this type of things, because all people are entitled to have good food that is safe for consumption. So the conversation about us clamping down on this type of stores where even this type of goods are discounted, we are of the view that it shouldn't be happening. Everybody is entitled to good products that are safe for consumption.
Thank you so much for your time. Prudence Moilwa is the National Consumer Commission's head of complaints as well as investigations. Well, as we've just indicated, coming up next, we'll be in conversation on the surge in the sale of expired foodstuff and what some of the contributing factors of this are.